Now, I'm going to proceed, and I'm also going to talk about the track 2, where there's another webinar panel discussions that's going to happen, which is the reading of young adults books, young adult books in India, which is moderated by Colin Kelman. Again, the NLF team would be putting up a link for the attendees if they want to move on to that track. So do look out in the chat box. We are also going to move to our panel discussion on this track, which is the stories that matter to emerging readers. But you can see it on the screen here. But yes, before we go, we're also going to hear from a little student, Aneska Iris Sequeira, who's also from Neve Academy, talking about how NBA or the Neve Book Award is relevant to her. Can we have a video, please?
Hi, I'm Aneska from grade 1A, and today I'm going to talk about how the Neve Book Award is relevant to me. So for the last few weeks in library class, we have been reading some of the NBA shortlisted books. And after that, I look forward to the book discussion where we connect the book to ourselves. So last week's book was Mountains of Mumbai, and we had to write 3 things we like about our city. So it gives me an opportunity to be reflective and to use my thinking skills. So I'm proud that I have 2 of the NBA nominated books, which are In My Heart and Rattu and Puri's Adventures in History. So in Rattu and Puri, it's about freedom fighter like Rani Lakshmi Bai and how fiercely she fought for her people. And it makes me believe that even I can be brave and I can stand up for what is right. So when I hear these authors and even see them, it reminds me that I write small moments and information books in class, and it motivates me to be a better author. And when I am one someday, I hope my book will be chosen for the Neve Book Award. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Aneska. Thank you. And now we're going to move on to our next panel, which is the stories that matter to emerging readers. We have our moderator, Rasil Kaur Ahuja. Rasil is one of the co-founders of the Neve Literature Festival and is an author. Rasil, over to you.
Thank you so much, Ruchita. This is such a fabulous day today that we are all together to celebrate the Neve Book Award and to celebrate the authors that we'll soon announce the winners of. But I want to also say that I would like to extend congratulations to all the authors who have been shortlisted this year. So let's start. We have with us today Aarti Sonthalia, who's written the book called Hungry to Play. And in this book, her character Kabir is like many others. He's really good at some things. He's not so great at other things, but he's convinced himself actually that perhaps he's not as good as he thinks he is, whether it's at tennis or in a particular subject area. So there's also a little bit of a mind game in addition to tennis. And we learn as we read this book, basically how Kabir learns to believe in himself. Next, we have with us Aftab Yusuf Sheikh, who's written a book called Letters to Ami. Welcome, Aftab.
Hello.
Hi. In Letters to Ami, we roam the gullies of Delhi and we chance upon some beautiful monuments, and I'm sure many of you have seen these. And we learn that there are stories that are trapped within the walls of these monuments. And as that's happening, we also embark on a very wonderful journey with the main character, Fatima. And Aftab will speak about that shortly. We also have with us Parvati Sharma, who's written the book Rattu and Puri's Adventures in History, where we're introduced to some very unexpected guests and visitors from 1857. And through their stories, Rattu and Puri actually learn how to fight and win their own battles, but without swords. Right, Parvati? And I'd like now to welcome Priya Narayanan, author of Srinivas Ramanujan, Friend of Numbers. Srinivas is actually a very unlikely hero. You know, he doesn't stand up against people. He actually stands up for himself and very quietly pursues his own dreams. So this is a lovely book for all young readers. And next we have Lalita Iyer, who's written the book The Girl Who Ironed Her Hair and Other Stories, which is full of misadventures, exactly the kind that our young readers are looking for, you know. And actually, I would say most kids would say, I didn't, trouble found me. I didn't find the trouble. I mean, I don't make any trouble. So we'll see through Lali's adventures how trouble finds her. Thank you all for joining us today. Each one of the books in this year's shortlist is touching upon a child's identity through culture and real world experiences. And it makes me wonder, where does culture come from? How much do the experiences of previous generations, because in a sense we are responsible for bringing culture to our children. How much do we continue to exert influence on how we write for children today? So I'd like to start with Lalita and then welcome the other panelists into the conversation.
Rasil. Hi, everybody at Neve. It's so wonderful to be here. And I'm missing the cool weather of Bangalore, but this is good for now.
So Lalita, would you like to speak about how previous generations continue to exert influence on how we write for today's children?
Luckily for me and my child, I think we still belong to an intergenerational household where, grandparents are constantly in conversation and they are as much parenting me as they are grandparenting my child. And I used to always think back to my childhood and, just as my father used to tell me that at your age, I used to walk 6 kilometers and then cross a river to go to school or something like that. I was like, what would my equivalent be to my kid? And I would be tempted to say, when I was your age, there was no iPad, there was no internet, there was not even a television. But then it sort of struck me that, I didn't want to do the same things that my parents did to me. So I decided instead to allow myself to remember my childhood in a way that would seem real to my kid. So for instance, because there are hardly any photographs, he doesn't believe that I had a childhood. He can't imagine me as being mischievous, as, getting up to no good and all of that. And I don't really have proof, to supplement my data. So I instead thought, why don't I convert my memories and my allowing myself to remember details into stories? And I realized that for all the ordinariness of my childhood, there was so much material, there was so many stories. And I think because we didn't have, the dilution of technology and, the ability to not make eye contact with people because there was always a screen in front of you, we actually had more adventures. Because we had more conversations. We ran in, we had run-ins with people who sometimes caught us in our misadventures, because not everything turns out how you want it to be. So I feel that in the allowing yourself to remember lies, the potential to make your childhood come alive and perhaps relate it to the next generation and, make it look real. And it's as much the ordinary things that make for good stories than, as much as, say, fantasy or the things that today's kids are more used to, because they feel a story has to have superpowers and fantastical creatures and, robots and, all the really glitzy things. But, sometimes, you could have a brother who swallowed a nail and that could be a story. You could have, right. You could have been, you could tell your child, guess what, at your age, I had to detangle my hair for half an hour and then comb it, and each side took 20 minutes to plait. And then I had to do the same thing for my sister. And that could become a story. So
the ordinary is the adventure, right, Lalita?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think along with fewer devices, as you were mentioning, in all of our childhoods, there were also fewer helicopters. So we
Oh, yes.
actually had a lot more adventures than perhaps others might have the option of doing now.
Yeah. I mean, in today's time, someone could say, what were these children up to? Like with no supervision, what kind of childhood was that? But it was real.
Aarti, you have you have a young character, Kabir, who's also a little bit up to no good at times. What do you think? Are we exerting too much pressure or too much influence on children's writing today in terms of our own experiences and how we want them to see the world? Oh, yes.
Yeah,
Yes, Aarti.
Yeah, I think it's what Lalita said is very true. The kind of experiences we've had as kids is very different to what our children are going to have. But again, if I bring in books in between and the stories today, I think, and we relate to our culture, our names, as someone in the last discussion was talking, that, we don't have to look at a Tom or, now we can look at a Ram or a Sita or something like that, So I think that plays a lot of, difference. If you are reading about your own culture, it really plays a lot of difference. That's from my end.
Sure, and we can have Tom. It's just that he's just Tom from India.
Yeah,
right.
Of course. It's just that I think children, like when we read more of books from authors from abroad. So we imagined something that was not us. Now, you can relate to your own culture.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. Would anyone like to respond, Priya?
Actually, for me, the stories that my grandfather told me, that's something I really treasure. The way he told, I call it my generation ka, what do you call that? Audible, it's like, audio stories. So I have fond memories of my grandfather telling me stories. And that is something which I think, instilled the awe of stories in me and the power of stories. He didn't have to be moralistic about the stories he told me. He didn't have to tell me that this is what you get to learn from the story I told you. But then you get to learn it. You get to learn that through your self-discovery. And I think that is something which I would really think we should carry forward, as writers and as readers trying to decode stories even in the future generations.
I love that. Our oral stories are this generation's Audible. Thank you. So
yes,
I'll continue with my next question if there's no one else who'd like to speak on this point. Okay.
I would just say.
So Lalita, coming back to you again, as I was mentioning earlier, Lali is up to, I don't know, there's so many things that she's up to and all her antics are so enjoyable. You just laugh out loud when you're reading the story. So what is it about characters like Lali? And then, we have other characters in literature as well, like Judy Moody, for example, Junie B. Jones. They're also up to no good and they just crack you up. So what is it when they read your books, how that reflect their real world experiences? What do they discover about themselves? Are they just reading and just laughing, or are they actually discovering something about themselves through these stories?
I would like to imagine that that everyone finds a piece of themselves that is, afraid to be out there, but can be out there because of a story. I mean, sort of, a story gives you legitimacy to do so many things and to be so many things. And even if it is not like a very fantastical or anything like that, it's just, just an extension of who you can be. And I hope that, the fact that, Lali is not afraid to try things, to do new things, or to just go out of her comfort zone. The fact remains, of course, that, Lali doesn't have, parents constantly supervising, and, she has a working mom, and she's left to herself for quite a bit. And And it's not like today's times where, when if you have to go to play with somebody, you need a play date. I mean, Lali could just go and wander into somebody's garden or house, or, sometimes she got caught staring, stealing a rose, which she just couldn't help, being sort of swayed by. But I find that because we are, we live in times which are so protected and are so like scheduled and, choreographed. Our children don't have, the space or the space or the time or the opportunity to really do things in which they can truly be themselves. I mean, they can truly lose themselves or find themselves in that sense. So I wish that, with due respect to parents, I'm not saying that, here, please let your children loose and do what they want, but just, and I feel that perhaps this pandemic is an interesting space for children to just explore a little bit, because, some of them are overscheduled with Zoom and classes and stuff like that. But I think there is enough time, which is a very precious commodity. And even if that means exploring corners of your house, which you never thought having a conversation with your jhadu. I would say, because that is our best friend. I want to see jhadu pocha books coming alive, and I want to see, ordinary things becoming supernatural objects.
Yes. So thanks to this pandemic, the time is all ours, and we no longer need appointments to meet people. Actually, we can't even meet people on most days. But speaking of, if this someone else would like to say something, no? All right. So speaking of appointments, Aftab, your character Fatima, in a sense, has an appointment to meet her mother, as we find out in the book. Their setting is a very important component in your book. And there are books like yours and series like Greetings from Somewhere, again for younger readers, which purposefully draw readers to settings that are familiar and yet unfamiliar. We get to see them through a different lens, through a different set of eyes. So would you speak a little bit about how settings that are grounded in real public spaces, like Delhi's many ancient monuments, how do they shape your readers' view of the world? Like, what are you trying to bring to the reader by bringing them into these spaces?
Well, I would say that once I had this experience. I was in a college library or somewhere, and one of my friends was saying that his grandparents or somebody in their village, it was like they had never been to, they had never seen the railway station, which is near to their village. So that was very interesting as well as very baffling to me. So I found that interesting, but I also decided that I will not live a life like that. That I should know as much of the world as and in the olden time it was possible that people did not know about other things, so they did not want to explore anything else. Ignorance is bliss kind of thing. You don't know, then you don't want to do anything about it. But now we know the whole globe is in front of us, and we see that there are so many places and so many varieties of cultures and people to explore. So this idea, the one you were talking about from these two kids, Ethan and Ella, in that somewhere series, and in Fatima also, with Fatima also it is the same thing. Delhi is a city, and the people living in Delhi, for them mostly it is a normal routine thing. But this girl who has a very close connection with the place, not because of the place, but because of the connection she has with her mother, and her mother has a very deep connection with the place. So the mother's connection with the place moves on to the daughter. So she feels very close to the city, and she feels very close to normal things. There is a mention of a normal bench near the Qutub Minar. So she's sitting on that bench, and she's thinking that this is the same place where her mother used to sit. So it becomes, Qutub Minar is a part of world heritage, but it is also a part of their own personal heritage. The mother and daughter's personal, it's a personal property kind of thing. So that I find that very interesting to somehow weave a different place or different culture, a different set of people, and bring them to the children so that they can learn something about people who they haven't yet encountered, something like that. And also, I would like to add on that the discussion that Lalita ma'am was having, and she was saying, uh, I feel that we are the most honest in our childhood, and then we go on faking. We are not the real because we become conscious. I observe that children, very small children, they wear whatever their parents put on them, and it feels very heartening to see that the poor child is not even understanding what has been put on them. So they have very innocent. They are actually very innocent because they are not conscious like us. So the way we move on, so the childhood we had, it was, we were aware that nobody is, if you're hiding behind a tree, you are actually hiding. But today, if you're hiding behind a tree, you may be in front of a camera. So that space is very important, and I really feel sad for the today's children if they are not getting that hiding space, because these hiding spaces develop you, they let you grow, they make you something which you are supposed to be. So I feel like, and that is why writing for such people is very difficult. You cannot fool kids, you can fool elders and adults, but these children are very, they want everything exact, and that's a good challenge for us.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring up hiding spaces, because there's a certain amount of imagination that's involved in even where you hide, whether it's just under a bed or behind a door, or you create your own world. Some people just shut their eyes and they hide, right? So there's a lot involved there. It's interesting to me that when we look at settings, you're removing limitations. I think that's what you said, Aftab, earlier. But you're also opening a door for exploration. So it's not necessarily about armchair travel, because in this book and other books as well, there's a different type of exploration that's happening. There's a different type of self-discovery that's happening. This is not the Lonely Planet. This is a completely different experience. So could we talk a little bit about settings in general, whether you name them and give images of them or not? Like, how do those settings influence your writing and your storytelling? I put this to everyone.
Well, if I may say something.
Sure.
So in this letters to me, it is very clear that this is about Delhi. So this is understood. But I wrote another book which was on a similar note, which was like, this is based on a mother and daughter relationship, and it was based on a son and father's relationship. And there I had imagined the place to be Kashmir. Also, one more book I've been working on, which is about a cancer patient, a child who is a cancer patient, and there also I imagined, I tried to put in Kashmir, and I did not mention it anywhere initially. But people who read it, they felt something like it was based in the north or in Kashmir, because some clues are very evident, kind of that if it is snowing, it is obviously in the north. An Indian child is seeing snow out of the window, it is obviously in the north. But that is one thing. But many other things, the words, the phrases, the way they talk to each other, and the words that they use these things, they create an idea of a place. And I love this idea that whenever I go to a city, a place, a new place, I want that place to remember me. So I don't know how to do that. I just wanted people should know that I also came here. So somehow being able to write or something like that, at least we can make use of that place.
Yeah, thank you.
Force the place to remember us.
Leslie, would you like to add about how you use setting?
Yes, in my story Unlucky Chunki, because it's about superstition, I thought the setting of a village would be ideal, because the people in the village, they believe more strongly in rumors, and as the superstition, they hold on to these beliefs very strongly, and it would be better to set it in a village where where children can, whatever the activities of the village were related to this superstition. So in that case, I couldn't like set it in any other place. So the setting should create not only the character, how the character interacts with the plot, but also I thought the settings would give it a stronger plot.
Thank you. So now we're going to move on from national monuments to national heroes, where Ratu and Puri come face to face with someone from 1857. So Parvati, I want to ask you, we talked earlier about how kids love superheroes, right? But heroes come in many, many forms. So what is this X factor that heroes have? And not the cape, just the X factor. You know, whether they're from India's 1857 or 1947, or even say South Africa's apartheid movement. What's so special about them? And why do kids love them so much?
You know, I was thinking about this yesterday, and I remember there's this line in To Kill a Mockingbird. Atticus Finch says, he says, they've done it before, they'll do it again. And when they do it, it seems only children weep. And the it that he's talking about is injustice, right? And it's true that children have, in fact, Akhtar was also saying that children have, intense, or I would say unfiltered reactions to all kinds of things. So, the emotions, they are perhaps not necessarily more intense, but definitely unfiltered. They don't do this kind of, second guessing of our own feelings that we start to do when we, as we get older. And when it comes to ideas of justice, injustice, I think they are even more, there's an even greater engagement amongst children, because as children, they are quite used to being oppressed. They are small, they are weak. The grown-ups are telling them all the time, do this, do that, eat your saag and do your homework and brush your teeth, and they have wear clothes that at some point children just start deciding they don't want to wear certain kinds of clothes, but they have to wear them and have their photos taken. So this idea of this is not fair, I can hear myself feel it. Like all of us have these these sort of injuries from our childhood that we still feel about something being not fair. And I think that, in a sense, drives many of these stories, and certainly these, 1857, 1947, and of course apartheid, but many others. It's the hero who corrects what is not fair, who corrects an injustice, right? But also the hero herself or himself is not this kind of caped crusader, because the hero is also in many cases, and this I would say fiction, non-fiction, the Roald Dahl, Ruskin Bond, Harry Potter, all of the heroes are underdogs. They are also themselves much like the children, being told what to do by a more powerful force. So in this case, by this East India Company is being unfair to Rani Jhansi, and to Rani of Jhansi, to Nana Sahib, to Bahadur Shah Zafar. All of them are sort of being oppressed.
Yes.
So there's that sense, and I think that's what makes the hero. And I'm very glad you mentioned South Africa and the apartheid, and I just want to say quickly on that there is I know there's a sort of almost subgenre of literature about apartheid for children, right? But what's interesting, there is also a lot of the stories are also about children participating in the sort of movement, protests against apartheid, which is a very sort of strong example of how children can not only recognize but also react to different forms of injustice when they see it.
Yeah, that's actually lovely. Thank you so much. We will definitely be looking for those books about children participating in the apartheid movement. You're right. The X factor here is actually the fact that you're willing to stand up against injustice, and everyone's really an underdog, right? When we stand up for injustice because someone is being oppressed and someone is doing the oppression. So that brings me to, an unlikely hero, who is Srinivasa Ramanujan, who definitely did not fight a war as far as I know. But he certainly showed a lot of courage when he left behind every comfort he knew to pursue a dream in a new country. And we're talking about a time, as Lalita mentioned, where there were no devices. So you really were venturing out into the unknown. And I think biographies have a lovely way of helping children relate to people from our history. But when we tell the story of their childhood and not just of who they became, once they achieved a certain level of success. So Priya, will you talk about how biographies help young readers relate to historical figures and make connections with them?
Definitely. So what I feel is that, one, the USP of biographies is that they take these characters who, don't even get, a cameo in your history textbooks, and they kind of plonk them right in the middle of their very interesting life stories, and they make them the protagonists. And I think when children read those kind of stories, they can relate to them because as against fiction, where they know that these stories are, fantasy and this can never happen to me. These are stories of real people with real strengths and weaknesses, real vulnerabilities, and how they have actually overcome real problems. So there is that factor where children know that this person has faced these challenges and has come up top. So there is some kind of motivation, even hope for children. But apart from that, I think when writing about historical figures in biographies, they also give a context of the socio-cultural and political scenario at that time, and that is something which our children are not ever going to live, because it's a very different world that we are living in. But that opportunity to compare that situation and your own situation today, I think that's a very valuable comparison that children can take away a lot from. For example, if we talk about Rosa Parks or Ramanujan himself or Babasaheb Ambedkar, when we read their biographies, how did racism, how did caste, kind of impact their struggles? How did they aggravate their struggles? For example, I was thinking about it, and I found this very interesting contrast between Babasaheb Ambedkar. He was a victim of a caste injustice, being someone from the lower caste. But Ramanujan, being a Brahmin, being from the upper caste, he faced his own challenges, posed by his own caste. He was because Brahmins are extremely rule-driven. They're extremely, you do this or we'll excommunicate you. You do this or we'll excommunicate you. That threat of being excommunicated, and how do you deal with that challenge? So. And I think, when children read that, he put passion, beyond these, dictates of caste, and decided that I don't want to be a Brahmin, I want to pursue my passion. That is something which, children can take away a lot from. I don't want to be, without being, again, very moralistic, without writing it in so many words, I think there are these inherent, messages which a child, and can encourage that child and, parent conversations, which can lead to a lot of realizations for a child.
Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts. My sincere apologies. I have more questions and less time. So
Rasil, I'm going to pop in now because we have a couple of questions from the audience. Hello, everybody. Hi, Lalita. Happy to see you here. And I'm going to ask this question to everyone because I think it's a question that most parents want to ask, is that a lot of kids are totally into their mobiles right now. How do you encourage them to read? The parent also understands that the parents are also into their mobile, and I think the kids follow the parents. So please do share your tips. How do you make your children read more?
I think this is something am I audible? Okay. Yeah. So to every parent who's asked me, because I have been a teacher, so you get this very often, how do I make my children read? And I tell them, start reading. Because if you read, it's very likely, because children may not listen to you, but they always watch what you do. So if you want your child to be a reader, start reading. And I think a great place to start is children's books. because they are in the house.
Absolutely.
And they are easy to read, and you don't have to complain about font bahut chota hai, too many pages, this and that. So get through a book and the next and the next, and it's a cycle. It's a contagious thing, reading.
So I would like to add that my child was a reluctant reader, and he still is. And I have been struggling like crazy to get him off the screen and to put him to books. So initially I offered him lots of different kinds of varieties of book, adventure, and then, everything that was possible. And slowly I discovered that he likes reading biographies, and especially the Amar Chitra Katha books. So, and once I got him those Amar Chitra Katha books with images and, like graphic and all that, he loved reading them. So while teaching him to read, I discovered that it's important to read what you like and to introduce and understand what your child likes. So it's very, very important to know what, some kids love sci-fi, some like Harry Potter, some like biographies, and some like adventure. And when I give my child a book about adventure or something like, a book which is a little sad and a story, like, no, I don't want that. Go away. I hate reading. So, he just said that to me last week, I hate reading. And I'm like, okay. And I got a book from a cousin, Anjali Kauf, something like that. And he saw me reading. He's like, hey, that looks interesting. And he picked it up from my hand. So, and he read it. So they're constantly going to say that, no, the screen is way better. Netflix is so much better. They have so much variety, even teens for that matter. But as Lalita said, you have to read and slowly they will pick it up from you. That's it.
I think that's what most parents find it difficult, because if they've not been readers, but they yet want their children to be readers, and I think that brings me to the other question. Are there any tips or any things that you should do regularly with them? Because I remember I used to read regularly in the night to my older one, but he still didn't turn into a reader. But my younger one, who, you know how it is, by the time you have a second child, you kind of ignore and you're not so diligent with your parenting. So I actually made my older one read out to this younger one and said, I will test your reading and you can read a story to him. So it was like great delegation on my part, I thought. But the younger one reads a lot. So, but as parents, or, are there any tips or any things that you should do regularly with your kids to inculcate that? Because quite a few of them aren't readers, so is there anything else that they can do?
There's one thing that I want to say is that we focus a lot on reading as, we look at reading as reading of a book. Okay. Now we use the book as a device which indicates that you are reading. But in fact, our children are reading the world. They are reading stuff around them. Every time a child is observing or joining the dots or making a connection between something that happened to something that, that they saw in the past or whatever, every time a child is curious about, say, a road sign or, just a little flash of a headline in a newspaper, or, the change in color of, something around them, they are reading the world. And I think reading the world is actually also reading. So I feel that before they actually start reading books, as which is just one element of the world, as long as the child is reading the world, asking questions, engaging in conversation, they are reading. It's just that the reading is not, with relation to a book. And once this other reading sort of really is, participative, and you are involved with that and you are engaged with that and all that, books will happen. It's just a subset of the larger reading experience, according to me. And I know that, we all want to sell our books and we all want children to read books, but I feel books are not the only thing to read.
Thank you. Yeah, I think. Rasil, you can...
I absolutely... okay.
No, Priya, go ahead.
I just want to add one thing, that I absolutely agree with what Lalita said. But for, more practical an answer, which, I have suggested to a lot of parents and they've had some bit of success, is that you buy lots of books and, put them in every room, pile them up. And, when the kid feels really bored and has nothing to do, they'll be tempted to, हाँ, क्या है, देख लेते हैं kind of thing. So every room of your book, including the kitchen, keep books, even if if you're not a reader and you have not read them, it definitely will help if you've read them and, you kind of prod them and saying that, isme aisa hai, try reading it or something. But if you're not a reader also, if you do this, a lot of parents have told me that it has, had some effect. So yeah, you can try that out.
Okay, thank you. I think Rasil, you can take over and yeah.
Yes, thank you all of you for sharing your thoughts with us today and spending time with us today. And I want to thank the audience also for joining us. For anyone who has not yet read one of these books that have been shortlisted for the Neat Book Award, I strongly encourage you to do so. I strongly encourage you to read it for yourself, for the children who are in your lives, for you to read them together even. So thank you again for joining us.